Thanks, everybody. It's really fantastic to see you all here in person. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the elders and any First Nations people that are here today from the Dja Dja Wurrung people. We're meeting on their lands today. As a lot of you would be aware, I do a lot of enterprise bargaining. And whenever we do an acknowledgement of country at the start of enterprise bargaining, we really try and make the acknowledgement something that is tangible. And we like to issue a challenge, because in enterprise bargaining, one of the things that we need to be doing is saying in our enterprise agreements, we need to be creating entitlements that are going to make a genuine contribution to inclusivity, diversity in this country. So it's not good enough for us to just make these acknowledgements of country and then do nothing, especially in enterprise bargaining, and obviously at this Congress as well. We have an amazing opportunity to take tangible steps towards genuine reconciliation in this country. And I'd really challenge you all to find opportunities in your lives to do that. Okay, so in this session today, we're going to be talking about winning. Now, obviously, winning is something that we all like to talk about. And there's a lot to winning. There's a lot of different types of winning that we do. And what we're going to be talking about with our amazing panel of speakers here is our stories of struggle, success, and then how we win. We really want to give our amazing delegates here the opportunity to share with you their stories of struggle and winning, so that you can hear from them about how they've worked with their colleagues, with their comrades in their workplaces to win better entitlements, to create amazing change. And I think to really inspire you to see what we are all capable of if we work together. Now, the structure for the session is going to be that each of our amazing panelists is going to present on one of the incredible wins they've been involved with. We're then going to have some time in our tables to have a conversation about winning. And then we're going to talk about strength and numbers and what that looks like in practice for us as a union. Now, I don't know exactly what time we're finishing up, because I think we had a bit of a time scenario happen earlier. So I'm sure somebody will let me know what time I need to wrap up. Otherwise, I'm just going to talk until you kick me off the stage. So with Wendy sitting here, she's going to throw a jug at me. I don't doubt it. All right, so who's going first? Awesome, let's do it. Okay, we will welcome Justine.
Hello, everyone. You're actually in regards to the time factor, Julia has already spoken mostly about what I was going to say, so we've saved a bit of time there actually. But before I get started, I just want to share my feelings on being here and how amazing it is to be here representing our people and being with all of you who are representing your people. When we got off the coaches yesterday and we walked to the foyer to do our check-in, for me, so many of you I've seen on Zoom, but never met in person. So I was like, wow, there's Steve Howland, Grant, like so many people. For me, it was like walking into a room full of superheroes. And that is what you all are. You are superheroes for the people that you work for. So a little bit about me. Yeah, I've been working for NAB for 31 years now, and I've been a union rep for 10 years. In that time, I've done all kinds of things to assist people, so on and so forth. And last year, I was asked to be part of the union's bargaining team, along with Congress delegates Meg Nair and Adam Fletcher, who are here with us today. So my job today is just to let you know how we took on NAB at the ballot after management had walked away from bargaining in November of last year. If NAB had gotten their way, our members would have been delivered real-world pay cuts, would have had reduced conditions. For example, NAB is looking to grandfather RDOs, removal of annual leave loading, and they had none of the substantive issues that we raised in our claim resolved. For example, hours of work. It was clear that NAB had no intention to seriously work with us when HR said out loud during our last bargaining meeting, we think we've got the numbers to win the ballot. So good luck. So then we went to our ballot. On November 30th, we got our result. We didn't need luck. We had successfully won the vote ballot and we defeated management, having convinced 13,248 of our NAB colleagues to vote no. Yes. So how did we do that? With the union support, we held Zoom meetings of between 600 and 700 attendees across those sessions, explaining what NAB was looking to do and how that would affect them. We also had workplace chat, and there are some people in this room. Steve Howland was one, who was an absolute legend in the commentary that was going through our workplace chat about what was going on. We also had video messaging every time Meg, Adam and I stood up at the enterprise agreement meetings, and we would give updates on that. We also had the Facebook group. Meg was really active in our Facebook group. And we also had live question and answers via Teams. We had conversations, thousands and thousands of conversations, either over the phone or at work. Miles was really engaged with that. Thank you, Miles. And our meetings and videos, Facebook group, everything provided the info, message people to say, ask questions. It only convinced so many NAB colleagues because our members went out and passed it on to their colleagues with a conversation. On ballot day, we handed out close to 3,000 vote no Kit Kats across every major site in every capital city so we could speak to someone and remind them to vote. I did not get a Kit Kat because I don't work in there. I was very disappointed. No, kidding. So our key takeouts were: try communicating your message to every potential avenue. Tailor your message to your audience. In our case, the middle majority. There is something in your EA that is going to resonate with someone about something. Conversations won the day and the ballot. When you're having your conversations, make it fun, ask everyone to join. And over the month of November, we joined 111 new NAB members. Every NAB delegate here today will have a story of what they did and how it felt when we got the results through. It was an enormous effort by them and by all of our members, but be sure to ask them about their memories. For me, the memory of that process was waking up every single day and wondering how we were going. Are we in front? Are we behind? Where are we going? Those moments of doubt that just pushed me to have another conversation with someone that I hadn't already had a conversation with. So moving forward with your EA negotiations, that is how we got it, how we got the no vote. Okay. Thank you for listening.
I'm really glad that Justine spoke about the Kit Kats, because the Kit Kats, everyone knows what I'm going to say, but the Kit Kats were one of those funny ideas that I think it was Mark's initial idea. We should hand out a lolly, and we had this long conversation about what would be the most suitable lollies, and it was going to be Chupa Chups because then we could say the deal sucked, and we thought that would be funny. But then we thought, well, how annoying is it going to be to wrap stickers around lollipop sticks? Like, we'll get RSI, it will be no good. So we decided, and then we went and looked up what the lowest cost per item, because, you know, we always have members' best interests at heart. What's the lowest cost per item lolly we can get? And eventually we discovered it was Kit Kats at Costco. So I went to Costco on a Sunday night and bought their entire stock of Kit Kats. And if anyone's ever been to Costco, they have these massive trolleys full of Kit Kats. And when I got to the checkout, the woman who was serving me said, oh, what's with all the Kit Kats? And I had this vague recollection that you weren't allowed to use your Costco membership for commercial purposes. And I was like, oh God, I can't tell her that it's like for work. And I just said, I just really like Kit Kats. And this poor woman just went, oh, okay. And we got the hell out of there with our Kit Kats in tow. And then one of the most precious things for me about the FSU is when we needed to put thousands and thousands of stickers on these bloody Kit Kats, NMC, yes, it was Julia, Wendy, me, Jason, we all happened to be in Melbourne at the same time, and we were there late one night and we were like, bugger, let's just do it ourselves. So the National Management Committee of the union sat there at about 10 o'clock at night stickering the Kit Kats while we did our management meetings. I mean, don't clap. Like, it pales in insignificance to the work that you all do every single day, but it is one of my my funny little memories of that NAB campaign. So with that, we will hand over to Meg, who's going to talk about our incredible win on pay transparency.
I'll follow on from Justine, actually, because since she said, what's your favorite memory of the EA? I reckon I've got to Mark ringing me on the morning that the vote came through and going, Meg, we won. And I don't know when Julia rang, if it was the same day or not. but Julia rang me, and all I heard when I answered the phone was, and I was at work at the time, and I was like, oh my God, why is she screaming? And and I was like, yes, Julia, yes, we won, yes. And she's like, are you at work? I'm like, yes, I am. Yes, yes. I'm very happy. Yes, well, I'll talk to you later. Bye. But so I'm here to talk about pay secrecy, but where's Adam? Can't see Adam. But Adam is part of the team. Oh, he's not here, but he's part of our bargaining team. And I just want to say, I'm embarrassed to say that he is the only First Nations NAB colleague that I know. And really anyone from the general community is the only First Nations person I know, but he is an amazing example of what our colleagues are in the First Nations community. And I think it's really unfortunate that we don't have more Adams out there amongst us in NAB, in any employers that we work with. So pity NAB, Adam's not here, I'll tell him later in person. So as you probably know, the finance sector has one of the highest gender pay gaps in Australia. The full-time gender pay gap is 26.9% as at February 2022. There are many things that contribute to the gender pay gap, and it's a complex problem with no quick fix. We do know that there are things we can do that will help drive the gender pay gap down, and one of them is to improve pay transparency. Pay transparency means that a workforce is not subject to confidentiality clauses that prevent individual employees from disclosing their pay and remuneration details, but it also means that employers are transparent about how their pay systems work and the criteria that they use to set rates of pay. In February 2019, the FSU embarked on the first step of our pay transparency campaign and wrote to the largest employers in the industry, asking them to either confirm they did not require pay secrecy or to commit to abolish their pay confidentiality clauses ahead of International Women's Day 2019. In 2019, only 6 employers responded to say that they did not require their employees to keep the details of their pay and remuneration secret. In 2019, Equal Pay Day for all industries, this fell on 26th August. But the finance industry's Equal Pay Day didn't fall until a month later, as our gender pay gap is much higher than all the other industries' gap. On 28th August 2019, the FSU moved into the next stage of our campaign, launching our hashtag Pay Transparency Matters selfie activity. FSU members spent the time between the 20th of August EPD and the FSU's Equal Pay Day, which fell on the 6th of October 2019, posting selfies to social media, holding up the selfie sign, hashtag Pay Transparency Matters. In late September 2019, we posted pics of our members holding up selfie signs and a video showcasing member involvement in the campaign. We encourage members to use the hashtag Start the Discussion to encourage their colleagues to talk about their pay. When COVID-19 hit in 2020, this campaign took a hiatus while we focused on COVID-19 related matters. We ramped up the campaign again in the second half of 21, when we started working more closely with politicians from the Australian Labor Party who were on the House of Representatives Economics Committee. The HOR Economics Committee regularly grills the CEOs of the major players in the finance industry. In early August 21, RBA Governor Phil Lowe admitted to the committee that the RBA staff contracts contained pay secrecy clauses. When pressed on it by MP Andrew Lee, RBA Governor Lowe agreed that they wouldn't be enforced. RBA was the first to make this commitment. In September, all of the big bank CEOs appeared in front of the committee, and they were questioned on their approach to pay secrecy by ALP members of the committee. ANZ restated that they don't have any pay secrecy clauses. NAB admitted that their employment contracts contained confidentiality clauses, but said that nothing in their arrangements prohibited people from having the conversations, and that no one had disciplinary action taken against them for talking about their pay. Westpac acknowledged that their employment contracts included confidentiality clauses, but said that they would look at it, but that these prohibitions were not enforced. CBA admitted that they had a standard confidentiality clause in their contracts, but said that they were not enforced. We used the information that the CEOs had given the HOR committee to back in the next step in our campaign, which was to challenge workers to start the discussion knowing that their employers were not going to enforce confidentiality clauses. In October 21, we launched our pledge where we asked members to make a commitment, hashtag start the discussion with their colleagues and talk about the importance of pay transparency. Pay transparency can reduce the gender pay gap by as much as 30%. During this campaign, the CBA sacked one of their workers for, amongst other things, talking about his pay with his colleagues. In November 21, the FSU took action in the Fair Work Commission against CBA for sacking this worker. In November 21, after the worker was sacked, we launched a petition calling on the CBA to remove pay confidentiality clauses from their contracts. On 9th December 21, CBA Executive General Manager of HR confirmed to a Senate committee hearing into job security that pay secrecy was the reason that they sacked one of their workers, despite telling the HR committee that this clause wasn't enforced. In mid-December 21, FSU wrote to CBA, NAB, and Westpac asking if they had used the months since their appearance at the HR committee to reassess their pay secrecy clauses, and again asking them to remove them. In the same week, the NAB told us these clauses weren't actively enforced. NAB workers were provided with their 21 remuneration outcomes letters that clearly stated that their pay was confidential. I'm having a bit of a giggle because the wonderful Ange reached out to me via WhatsApp and she's like, do you have anything on your bonus letter? And I was like, oh, yes, actually. Last line, reads through to the next one. Here you go. And then she was on a roll. We asked NAB to explain why they were saying one thing to their workforce and something different to the FSU. That sounds like typical NAB though, doesn't it? NAB then confirmed that their REM review letters did not meet with their commitments and posted a note on their intranet confirming that staff are free to discuss their remuneration should they wish to do so. Now, I went looking for this the other day. It was like the smallest print in the smallest part of the screen. So they were really enthusiastic about telling the staff about it. NAB were the second of the big banks to provide their workforce with the freedom to discuss their pay. Westpac confirmed in December 21 that they had decided to abolish their clauses and that they would make an announcement in early 22. That left CBA out in the cold. In December 21, CBA was still unwilling to commit to removing these clauses, so the FSU launched a survey to ask CBA workers about their experience of pay secrecy. The results of the survey were published in a report, The Price of Silence, launched on 8 March 22 at the FSU's International Women's Day event. Following the media attention and the pressure from FSU and members in late March 22, Westpac finally announced the abolition of their secrecy clauses, becoming the second last of the big four banks to do so. On April 1st, no, not an April Fool's joke, the CBA finally agreed to join the party and abolish their pay secrecy clauses. In May 22, we elected the federal Albanese government. They had made a commitment to outlaw pay confidentiality. In December 22, the Secure Jobs Better Pay legislation passed the parliament. It is now illegal for pay confidentiality clauses to be included in employment contracts. The prohibition overrides any enterprise agreement clauses. This is a big win that FSU members spent years fighting for. And just to recap, that started in Feb 2019 and it finally ended in December 22. As always, there's still work to be done. We still need to fight for transparency in how pay rates are set, and we need to overcome the cultural ick associated with talking about pay. Thank you.
Okay, first, I just want to start by introducing myself. I'm Samantha Halliday. I work for the Commonwealth Bank. I've worked for them for 9 years. I would like to thank Paul Blackmore for helping me with my speech. I don't know where he is, but I want to acknowledge he helped. And also my 4-year-old daughter, Florence. She made notes for me. Oh. Yeah, she makes more sense. Yes. Okay, so I began my career at CBA through an agency. I was on a contract in July of 2014. So I had the opportunity to sit next to my colleagues and to chat to them for a good 6 months. And I sat next to a unionist, June Anderson, if anyone knows her, who had told me about the different types of contracts that CBA were using. So I actually had an advantage of understanding that there were different types of contracts. And when CBA offered me a contract, I read it carefully and I could see that they were offering me an individual arrangement which I actually didn't want. At that point, I already knew I wanted to be on the enterprise agreement. So I requested to be on the enterprise agreement and to see that contract. And everyone was so confused. Unfortunately, HR could not work it out how to do that. They stalled. They refused to give me a written contract with a written value for my salary. And I went unpaid for 2 weeks because I was already a permanent staff. I had spent the payments from the agency had stopped, and I had not yet signed my contract with the Commonwealth Bank. At this point, HR verbally advised me that my salary would be the minimum under the ComSec section of the IA. And let's just say it was around $20,000 less than what I was making through the agency. And I made the decision that I couldn't go on to the enterprise agreement because of that, and I would sign the IA. I did, though, to make myself feel better, the day before I signed it, I did go online and join the union. I actually I jumped into my story, and I was going to tell you a little bit of a background about myself first. So you may be able to tell from the accent. I'm from the US. I'm from Michigan. I'm from a rural part of Michigan. Oh, I thought someone was going to clap. No? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, I'm from the area that they now refer to as the Rust Belt. Okay, so in Michigan, where I grew up, it was very industrial. My parents were factory workers, and when I was 9 years old, my dad got a job for Yoplait. They make yogurt. You might have heard of them. They're from they have a factory in my hometown, guys. Claim to fame, Reed City, Michigan. And this was, yes, thank you. This was a union shop, which that's how we referred to things back home. The factories, we referred to them as shops. And my father was a union rep for his workplace. On the other hand, my mother worked for an ununionized factory. And as a child, I would hear her come home and be so frustrated and express how they were forced to work on unsafe machines unless OSHA was coming in, which OSHA was nice enough to give the factory advance notice so they could shut down the unsafe machines and look like they were doing the right thing. So that's, as a child, that's what I grew up just knowing the value of a union. I only learned that there were people that were anti-union when I went to university and made an offhanded comment that my coworkers and I should unionize. And that was not met well, and I was very confused. I'm still trying to work it out. Okay, so sorry, that was a bit of my background. And so I'm going to go back to my personal story. I had signed the very crappy ComSec individual arrangement so I could get paid and eat and live in 2015. And I also knew I signed it knowing I could change to the enterprise agreement at any time. So I signed with that stipulation. In 2016, I wrote to the bank again saying I would like to change to the enterprise agreement because I didn't like working for free. They would schedule us to work for 40 hours a week and pay us for 38. And I didn't like that. Again, HR was very confused. They did not know how to switch me to an enterprise agreement. At this point in time, I had conversations with senior managers, executive managers that I told them that the agreement that I'm on, it couldn't possibly meeting the standards because I was getting no penalty rates, no overtime rates. I was working on a 7-day roster. I could work anywhere from starting 7 a.m., finishing 10 p.m., getting no penalty rates. And especially for my colleagues that worked regularly for late hours or on the weekends, they would be far behind. That again resulted in the CBA not giving me a written contract with a written figure of what my salary would be. Again, they dragged their feet probably for a month while they had meetings and verbally gave me a figure over the phone. And the executive manager said, listen, we're going to start doing loadings of 20% on Saturday and 40% on Sunday. And actually, I'm considering making everyone's schedule 38 hours. They did do the loadings. They didn't change the actual hours to 38 hours until years and years later. So again, I stayed on the IA. That brings me up to 2020, which I had just had it. And I didn't care what figure they gave me. I was going to go under the enterprise agreement. So I requested to be under the EA, and I finally made it. They finally figured out how to do that. Okay. And I tell you that story, and I just want you to know that the story wasn't rare. I wasn't alone. And actually, maybe the rare part of my story was that I was actually aware of the different type of contracts, and I was actively trying to switch the enterprise agreement, and CBA made it extremely difficult. You had to have nerves of steel and money in the bank to wait them out. Most of the staff that started with the bank would be offered an IA and not realize that they had any other option. There's one small line towards the end of the contract that mentions the EA, and a lot of people missed that. So there was no clear comparison of contracts offered to new staff so they could make a proper decision for themselves. Okay. And actually providing the IAs on the commencement of employment is a breach of the Fair Work Act. So that was naughty of them. It was. Can you tell my mom? All right. So CBA, they did rely on a clause in the individual arrangements that under the individual arrangement, you would be better off overall, which sounds good, right? But they actually had no testing in place to actually make sure staff were better off overall. And that resulted in underpayment of thousands of staff. I probably had 4 or 5 underpayments. I lost track. Sometimes they had to go back and do an underpayment on the same year again. It got confusing. That's my personal experience there with that. So the finance sector union knew about this issue for a long time, and they had campaigned for years against the use of the individual agreements. And because of the FSU's work, the Fair Work Ombudsman commenced proceedings in the federal court against CBA and its dodgy contracts. Last month, as a part of these proceedings, CBA admitted to wrongdoing and serious breaches of our enterprise agreement. And contravening the Fair Work Act. So at this point, they've also admitted that senior HR managers knew of the systemic conduct that led to thousands of workers being underpaid. So CBA was well aware for years, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they were aware since 2010. So when I'm raising issues in 2016, honestly saying, hey, the numbers don't work out, guys, and I'd like to get paid. And they were like, well, you know, even. They knew all the time. Okay. Where are we now? So the workers have been repaid the underpayment. That's great. The IA contracts are no longer offered. And what we are now waiting for is CBA will soon learn what their penalties will be that they must pay later this year. And I believe that'll be around September. Personally, my hope is that whatever this penalty is, it's the magic number to inspire them to do the right thing in the future and listen to their values that say, not only should we say, can we, should we? Should you underpay your workers and systematically conduct wage theft? No.
It's amazing, isn't it, that Australia's richest bank couldn't see their way clear to pay people properly and made so many mistakes. Like, oh God, I'm sure all these people lost their jobs, didn't they? Nope. All of those, that entire HR team that oversaw that are still employed. And if we're thinking about what should the formulation be for the penalty, I've got an idea. If we knew about this in 2010, how about we just take whatever their annual profit was for every year since then and make that the penalty? And it's in the order of $7 billion a year. Yeah, because that profit was made off the back of underpaying their workers. Next up, Carolyn, from CBUS, who's going to be talking to us about the incredible win there of menstruation and menopause leave in their enterprise agreement.
Hello, I am very excited to be here. I've been at CBUS for 4.5 years and have been a rep for that length of time. And I was also a rep at my previous company as well. So the lead up to our win was actually started with the FSU's national conference in 2021, where a session was run called "What Do We Want to Be Famous For?" And they heard from Mary Crooks, AO, the director of Victorian Women's Trust. That was when the union first committed to campaigning for paid menopause and menstrual leave. So it was automatically put onto our log of claims. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, yep, I'm right behind that. We had some hesitancy around including it. We also had some pushback from our members. And I think a big part of that is it is still very much a taboo subject. There's a lot of stigma attached around, especially menstruation, but menopause as well. We did convince our members that it was an important condition to include. I think one of the reasons why we got it across is because I spoke from my own personal experience. From the time I got my period at the age of 12, off and on for the last 30 odd years, I have had issues. Started on the pill when I was 13. That went for about 6 months, seemed to solve it. Then I had issues in my 20s. I turned 30 and I had major issues. I had, I'll be honest, heavy periods, extreme pain. There would have been times that I would have taken leave if I had menstrual and menopause leave. And it's simply because I had run out of sick leave for things like colds. I also didn't feel comfortable telling my boss that I was taking leave because of it. And I spoke to that around the table during our negotiations. I think the thing that finally really clicked with our P&C executive was she actually asked me the question, was there any managers that you felt comfortable saying that you needed the day off because you're on your period? And I said, no. I've been working for close to 25 years. I don't even know. There was no one I felt comfortable talking about. There is so much stigma and so much stigma attached to it. Even women don't necessarily like talking about it because there is so much attached to it. And it's just one of the things about the CBUS win is it has helped remove that stigma, and it is not a taboo subject. And you don't even have to tell your manager that you're taking it because you've got your period. We can just apply for it through our system, which is fantastic. The biggest part of it is not the 12 days paid leave that we have. I've spoken to colleagues. The biggest part is the flexibility clause that we have. And that a big part of that is the flexibility that if you're in the office, that if you need time away from your desk, you can go to our wellness room, you can go outside, you can work from home. And it has made a massive difference to the people at CBUS who menstruate and those who have menopause. That's the next thing I get to look forward to. Yay. And no medical certificate is required, which is even better. And it is one of probably the conditions I'm most proud of with our last negotiations was the menstrual and menopause leave, because it is such an important thing for people who menstruate to have that stigma removed is really what it comes down to. And I'm so proud of it, and I'm so happy I was a part of it. For future menstrual and menopause leave, the FSU has joined a working group with other unions. We will be surveying our members to learn about the impact of menopause and menstruation on finance workers. So look out for it, and please take part in it and be honest, upfront. If you don't menstruate yourself, ask your partners, your mum, your sisters, your children, whatever, to get their viewpoint as well, because there is such a wide gamut of symptoms and impacts on people. The ACTU is also going to include a question about menopause in their next Work Doesn't Hurt survey of Australian workers. So it'd be great if our FSU members and everybody here commit to getting involved and filling it out, because that will extend it not just within the finance industry as well. And our win goes to show that when we make commitments here at our conferences, we follow through. And though this change is a small change compared to others, it actually happens. And I'm very proud of the fact that CBUS is the leading employer when it comes to menstruation and menopause leave. Thank you very much.
Okay, everybody. I think we will come back together and briefly review our responses to these questions. Now, the team here, I think, is all very happy to have this amazing amount of information that you've given us, and we will try and find a way to share that with you. But for now, we're going to quickly review these responses. And what I would say, from having stood up the back briefly and looked at them, is that there are some really common themes throughout them, which is great and also what you would expect. So what helps members win? A lot of it came back to solidarity, courage, standing together, and making sure that people know that bosses are not generally working in their interests. They're generally working to maximize value for shareholders or fund members. It's not acting in your best interests. Might pop to the next one. What stops us from winning? So these answers really centered on themes of individuality, people not necessarily feeling part of the collective, having collectivist values, and realizing that we can achieve more together than we can on our own. Some of the themes also focused on people's individual experience of work, that they feel like employment has made them isolated and they feel disconnected from their colleagues. And that makes it much harder to join with their colleagues to fight for things that matter to everybody. And too busy, I think that's probably one that we can all empathize with to some degree. All right, and last one is what do we need to do differently? What should we start doing? French style protest is is that you? Oh. Look, it wouldn't be a union conference if someone didn't say general strike. So I know we had comrade bingo last night, but I think for those of you playing the sort of union conference bingo, we've got someone singing Solidarity Forever, Steve Howland. It's going to be you, and it's not going to be right now. We've obviously got general strike, and there's a few other bits and pieces that I'm sure you'll see in the next couple of days. But there are some really amazing suggestions here, and what this really should draw more Kit Kats. Obviously, I wholeheartedly support that suggestion too. Yeah, we've done Chupa Chups. We are a chocolate powered union some days, and recruit more members. So that's really what I want to finish by talking about with you all today. Then when we think about what our amazing sisters just told us about with winning at NAB, winning pay transparency, winning at CBUS, what all of those wins have in common is that they were centered around members. Each of those campaigns involved a whole lot of members campaigning together and a whole lot of members joining our union as a result of those campaigns. And that's kind of one of the inescapable realities of unions, that unless we have more members, our power gradually diminishes. I know we've just spoken a lot about winning, but as the leaders of our union, it's really important that you understand the realities that the Australian trade union movement is facing. We talk a lot at the FSU about punching above our weight. We're an organisation with around about 23,000 members, and we have around about 80 staff. Pretty small, right? Especially when you think about CBA having 45,000 staff. You know, really, really significant size difference. But even at that size, we take down some of the biggest employers in the country. We took down NAB. A couple of weeks later, we took down BOQ. So we are certainly punching above our weight. And this is an incredible testament to everybody in this room and the amazing work that you do. So I think you really need to be commended for the incredible work that you do, but we also need to acknowledge that this isn't a sustainable situation for us to be in. Because the cost of us punching above our weight constantly is that all of you in this room, including our staff, are working incredibly hard. And it can't be a situation where you're having to carry this burden on behalf of everybody in the sector to keep our union sustainable. What I was really thinking about with when Sam was speaking is, what if there was no FSU in that scenario with CBA? They are ripping off tens of thousands of workers by millions and millions of dollars, and they're doing it intentionally. This wasn't a mistake. We told them this was against the law, and they said, oh, that's really nice, FSU, we're going to keep doing it anyway. If we didn't exist, nobody would have raised that, and nobody would have persisted in getting it fixed. And that's why the survival of the FSU is so incredibly important, because nobody else is doing that work that we are doing. We know that the challenge is getting bigger all the time. The last FSU National Executive took really bold action to make sure that the FSU was financially sustainable. And that took an enormous amount of work. And I know that there are some executive members here, and I know Julia's already congratulated them. That was a power of work that was done to make sure that we can continue to do this work. But what we know is that the union movement in Australia is declining, and the FSU membership is largely reflecting that trend. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, of course, because we do certainly have areas of the FSU that are growing. CBA is growing at the moment. Superannuation is growing. Insurance is growing. So we do know that it can be done, and we do know that we can do it. But what we also need to acknowledge is that there are really significant headwinds that we're facing into. We know that branch closures are one of the biggest problems in eroding our historic area where we used to have the bulk of our members. That's been a massive issue. Moves to individual contracts, moves to the individualization of work more broadly, working from home. There have been a whole bunch of issues that we've had to contend with, but the game isn't over, because none of us would be sitting here today if we thought that we couldn't win. And what gives us a lot of hope is the fact that we have won and we continue to win. We often sit in enterprise bargaining negotiations and we talk about things that any reasonable, ethical employer would be completely fine with. We're talking about making sure that your pay doesn't go backwards when it comes to the cost of living. We're talking about fair parental leave. We're talking about cultural and religious diversity leave that means that there's a genuinely inclusive workplace. And employers say no. They say no to the lot of it. They tell you that you need to work for free. They tell you that, oh, you're working in a contact center, you've got to come in 15 minutes early and just do that for free. Like the misconduct of our employers is so enormous and so great that we almost can't even stand here and describe it, because they find so many creative ways to be terrible. But the only thing that stops them is us, is all of you in this room standing together in your union. You are the people that is stopping this race to the bottom from getting any worse than it already is. We know that the banks and other employees in the finance sector are driving people to burnout. We know that there are people who can't work from home, even though they've been doing it successfully for the last 3 years. But the thing is, we also know that employers will do just enough that you won't quit. And they'll do just enough that you will vote up their shitty enterprise agreement proposal. And they'll do just enough that you don't join your union and fight for better. And that's what the fine balance is between workers and employers. They will always do just enough that the revolution isn't going to occur. And I'm happy to see that that was on the slide with the French style revolution. They're going to do the absolute bare minimum to stop a revolt. And what we're always trying to do is to push that line. We are always trying to say to them, it needs to be a bit better, a bit better, a bit better. And that's what we're doing together. And the challenge now isn't just that we're fighting for new amazing things like menopause and menstrual leave. We are also having to defend all of the entitlements that we've won over many, many years. In almost every single bargain that we do now, employers will come for RDOs, employers will come for leave loading. And these are entitlements that unionists in decades before us have won, have fought for and won. And now it's up to us to defend these entitlements as well as try and win these new ones. So we shouldn't underestimate the challenge that we're facing here. It is a significant challenge, but we should take a lot of heart from the stories that we just heard. Because what these 4 women told us is that it is possible and it can be done. And if we think about the themes that ran through all of their presentations, what they did was they stood together, they had a clear sense of purpose, and they didn't take no for an answer. And that's something that we all really need to grapple with, because our job as leaders in this union is to be the leaders in our workplaces. So when you go back to work on Monday, this is the kind of information that you need to make sure is spreading throughout your workplaces. We know that in areas where the union has strong growth, we have better industrial outcomes. We have better campaign outcomes. So there's a really clear link between the campaign work that we do and the growth outcomes we achieve. And those growth outcomes, Jason's going to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, but those growth outcomes, so getting more members in the door and keeping them as union members, it's kind of the, we know it's great, we love it when our union's growing, but it also has a really important function of keeping the lights on. It has a really important function that when we need to take NAB to the federal court because they're ripping off thousands of workers and working them into the hospital, we can pay top barristers to do that work. So the money is kind of the bit that I think gives us all a little bit of ick about this. We don't really love to talk about it, but it's incredibly important because without it, we don't survive. And without the union, the finance sector goes unchecked. And I think we've all heard today what happens when the finance sector union goes unchecked. It's not a reality that any of us want to live in. Look, the finance sector union should go unchecked in our revolution gathering. Please don't put any limitations on that. Now, I know that there is a temptation. That's why Wendy's sitting in the front row when I'm talking, so she can just toss something at my head if I go too rogue. Yeah, we're gonna finish with some discussion about general strike. Just some unprotected industrial action. Exactly right. Now, I think there is a real temptation for us to look back in time to what used to work. When the FSU used to have 80% density, when unionism was compulsory, what a dream. But a lot of those things are gone, those days are gone. And we've elected some fantastic Labor governments around the country, and that's an incredible achievement. But when we see the changes to the Fair Work Act, we're not going to go back to compulsory unionism. That's not going to happen. But the new tools that we do have are going to give us some really good opportunities to do better organising and to do modern organising. But what we need to do is look at the lessons from the past, but be a genuinely inclusive, progressive union looking forward. Because the workers that we're organising now are not the workers that we were organising in the 70s. The people that need to join the union today are the finance workers of the future, and they want something different. And one of our challenges for all of us in this room is to identify what that is and then become the union that they want to join. And this is a project that the FSU is working intensely on at the moment, but it's also a project that all of you really need to be involved in. The financial sustainability of the union is essential. It means we can buy Kit Kats, right? So even for that reason alone, it's incredibly important and it's something that we need to commit ourselves to. But we can't talk about winning without talking about member growth. And that's the thing that we all need to really give some thought to, and what I really want to challenge you all to think about. Because you wouldn't think, with all of the incredible wins that we achieve, you wouldn't think that we wouldn't be growing, right? You wouldn't think that. And the amazing wins that we achieve time and time and time again kind of obscure that reality that in certain areas of the union, we aren't growing. But in other areas, we certainly are. So what I want you all to think about is that this is something that we can do. This is a challenge that we can win. There's absolutely no question about that. I think everybody in this room knows in their soul that we can do it. But it's going to take work, and it's going to take us doing something different, because we know that a lot of the things that we did in the long, dark history, they're not suitable for the finance sector that we're trying to organise today. They were fantastic at the time, but now we're dealing with a different set of workers who want something different. So our challenge is to figure out what that is and become that union, always staying true to our values, of course, but we need to think about the future of the sector and evolve with that. What this all comes down to is power. It's the power to shape our lives. It's the power to shape our workforces, and it's the power to make sure that we have always improving pay and conditions. You are all incredibly powerful in your workforces, and it's our job as the FSU officials to amplify that power. We saw that beautifully this morning with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Committee. Our job is to amplify your voices. We are a winning union. You've all seen that today, but together we're going to be stronger than ever if we can also consistently become a growing union. So I challenge each of you to leave Congress at the end of Thursday with a really clear idea of the contribution that you're going to make to us not only being a winning union, but also a growing union.